Welcome to another Wednesday night class in Halebanon, Avenue S, the corner of East 9th. We are learning Perashat Bo. Bo, as we know, is numerical value 3. Bet Aleph is 3. To denote that in this week's Perashat, we will talk about the last 3 makot that Borei Olam will send the Egyptians in Mitzrayim. Tonight, B'ezrat Hashem, we will talk about the 7th Makkah, which is Makat Arbe, the locust, the grasshoppers. Moshe and Aaron come to Paro and they tell him, Ki ima en ata leshalech et ammi, if you still refuse to send my nation, hineni mevi mahar arbe birbulecha, I will send locust to your border. The rabbis say this was amazing. Why does Borei Olam have to say that he's going to send he's going to send a locust in the border of Egypt? Obviously, where else is he going to send it? Egypt was having a lifelong war with their neighbors, whatever country it was. Over what? Over the borders. This belongs to me, this belongs to me. And the locust came and it only fell in the border of Egypt to quiet both sides, to say these are the border lines. This is Egypt, this is not Egypt. So quieted down the whole war, and it stopped that. וכיסה את עין הארץ, ולא יוכל לראות את הארץ. ואכל את יתר הפלטה הנשארת לכם מן הברד, ואכל את כל העץ הצומח לכם מן השדה. It will cover the surface of the earth, so that no one will be able to see the earth. It will consume the remaining residue that was left to you by the hail, the barad, and it will consume all the trees that grow for you from the field. ומלאו בתיך ובתי כל עבדיך ובתי כל מצרים אשר לא ראו אבותיך ואבות אבותיך מיום היותם על האדמה עד היום הזה. They will fill your houses, the houses of all your servants, the houses of all of Egypt, such as your fathers and your grandfathers have not seen from the day they came onto the earth until this day. Seemingly, this Makkah wreaked havoc over Mitzrayim. Now when Moshe is implementing this Makkah, when Moshe is executing this Makkah, when he's bringing this plague down to Mitzrayim, it says, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, so Hashem speaks to Moshe and he tells him, Netei yadecha al eretz Mitzrayim ba'arbe. Stretch out your hand, let the arbe come down, Vaya'al al eretz Mitzrayim, let it come down, let it go up on the land of Mitzrayim, Vayochal et kol eseb ha'ares, et kol asher ishira barad. Basically, whatever was not consumed or destroyed from the hill, from the barad, comes the arbe and takes care of everything. There's nothing left. This is the pasuk I'd like to speak about. ויעל הארבה על כל ארץ מצרים, וינח בכל גבול מצרים. The locust swarmed, ascended over the entire land of Egypt, and it rested in the entire border of Egypt. Now this word vayanah, we only have it 2 times in the whole Torah. We have it over here, vayanah, which means it rested. And we have it when Borei Olam created the world, vayanah bayom ha-shebi'i. The reason why we are commanded to keep Shabbat is because Borei Olam created the world in 6 days and he rested on the 7th day. So seemingly there's a correlation, there's a relationship. There's something what to talk about between this arbe vayanah, it rested in Egypt, and the vayanah and the creation of the world. And Paro can't take it anymore. He calls Moshe and Aaron and he tells them, Hatati la Hashem Elohechem velachem. Okay, I admit, I sinned towards you and to your God. Ve'ata sana hatati acha pa'am. Please, do me a favor. Forgive my sin just this time. Ve'atiru la Hashem Elohechem. And entreat Hashem your God. Pray to Hashem, supplicate to Him. And please ask your God that He remove from me only this death. Paro is okay seemingly with the rest of the makot. He doesn't use this terminology. This is killing me. This locust is killing me. It's going to bring the death of me. He doesn't say that with the rest of the makot. Only this makkah arbe. He uses the word ve'aser me'alai rak et hamavet hazeh. It's so bad, I feel like I'm going to die. What is so special about the arbe? So these are the pesukim we will work with until we get to more pesukim later on. The Midrash Rabbah says, arbe lama hevi alehin. What was the measure for measure? What was the midah keneged midah? Why did Borei Olam send locusts, grasshoppers to Egypt? מפני ששמו את ישראל זורעי חיטים ושעורים. They made the Jews work in their fields, plant and crop and all that. לפיכך הביא עליהן הרבה. Measure for measure. You want to now get enjoyment, get benefit, get pleasure from what the Jews planted for you. ואכלו כל מה שזרעו להם ישראל. Now there will be nothing left of what the Jews planted for you. You made them work so hard to plant for you these crops. Now the locusts, the grasshoppers will get rid of everything. You won't have anything left. That's the measure for measure. I saw something fascinating in the Midrash Vayosha. That's the name of the Midrash. Ha'arbe haya kol kach gadol v'chazak. Now, when we hear the word locusts, grasshoppers, we think it's the small ones that they sell in Avenue U in the buckets. You know, the small ones, grasshoppers, because they eat that kind of thing. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was huge and powerful. So much so. It had teeth like a lion. And it had whiskers. And it had big lips. And when the Egyptian went into the house because he wanted to fortify himself from the locusts and grasshoppers, the arbe, the grasshopper, the locust used to bite, chomp away at the door and go inside and pick away at their ears, pick away at their noses. In fact, and you'll see why I'm telling you all this, the Midrash HaGadol says, "Ha'arbe haya ochel tachshitehem uchlehem v'chol hamudehem." No more jewelry. No more luxuries, no more diamonds, nothing. Masha'en came the rest of the makot. I mean, the arov came down. The arov was when wild animals came down. The wild animals only gored the humans. They didn't care about jewelries and luxuries. Here the arbe is eating away at their pearls, eating away at their diamonds. Umenakeret einehim, gouge out their eyes. So now we understand why Paro is saying, anything but arbe. I can't take it anymore. But obviously there's more reasons. But we want to first get into what it means, vayanah. It rested. We have a Ba'al Turim that tells us, vayanah bet b'mesora. We have two vayanah rested in the whole Torah. Vayanah bechol gebul Misraim, as we said, it rested in the border of Egypt. Vayanah b'yom ha'shebi'i. When Hashem rested on the seventh day, melamed, you learn from here, juxtaposes two words, shenah ha'arbe b'shabbat. The arbe kept Shabbat. The locust, the grasshoppers kept Shabbat. Now, why do I care that the grasshoppers rested on Shabbat? Shehin didn't rest on Shabbat. Barad didn't rest on Shabbat. Dam was 7 straight days. It wasn't like it fell down. It wasn't like the water turned into blood 6 days and on Shabbat it turned back into water. No. It was Dam the whole 7 days. Sefardeah the whole 7 days. Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shehin, Barad. All of a sudden over here, Arbe, Ha'arbe haya nah b'Shabbat. Ha'arbe kept Shabbat. Why do I care that the Arbe kept Shabbat? Was the Arbe Jewish? What is it to teach me? Now, obviously, like we always say, the Torah is here not as a story. The Torah is here to teach me a lesson. What lesson do I learn that the Arbe rested on Shabbat? So there's a Be'ur Nifla, there's a beautiful explanation that every single animal or every single insect, when it bites, it's doing it for hana'ah. Right? A lion. Why does a lion bite and eat? Because it wants to derive pleasure. It's hungry. It wants to eat. It doesn't just go and make damage for nothing. It wants to bite and chomp away at an item and eat an item because it wants to derive pleasure from it. The Arbe Rabotai was chomping away and eating things that didn't derive any pleasure for them. They were eating pearls and jewelry and rings and diamonds. They didn't get any hana'ah. So with that being said, let's plug it in. Borei Olam doesn't want to give any tsa'ar to the animals. Let's take a lion for example. If the lion is biting and chomping away and eating at an item, If Borei Olam makes the lion in Makat Arov stop on Shabbat, that's Sa'ar for the Behemah. Borei Olam doesn't want to give Sa'ar to the Behemah. Borei Olam doesn't want to give any pain to the Behemah by making him rest and not do anything on Shabbat. But the Arbeh didn't derive any pleasure from eating the diamonds. So on Shabbat, Borei Olam gave him a rest. Why? Because if he would eat the diamonds on Shabbat, it would be Sa'ar for him. And Borei Olam has so much compassion and so much mercy and so much kindness. He doesn't want the animal to feel any pain. So therefore on Shabbat, as a day of rest for everybody, the Arbeh also rests. Why? Because you don't derive any pleasure. If I would tell you to the lion, to the elephant, to the tiger, to the bear, rest on Shabbat, but I can't eat on Shabbat, that's Sa'ar. Sa'ar ba'aleh hayim. I must eat. But the Arbeh, where he was eating everything else, on Shabbat, Borei Olam, stop, don't eat anything. That's one answer. The Mikdash HaLevi has a different answer. Mikdash HaLevi says, ונראה לומר על פי דברי המדרש על הפסוק ויהי בימים ההם ויגדל משה ויצא אל אחיו. Back in Perashat Shemot, 2 Parashiyot, we see that Moshe Rabbeinu grows older and he goes and he sees the plight of his brothers and he sees that one Egyptian is hitting a Yehudi. וירא איש מצרי מכה איש עברי מאחיו. Says the Midrash, ראה שאין להם מנוחה. Moshe Rabbeinu sees that they're working every single day. They're not resting at all. הלך ואמר לפרעה. So Moshe Rabbeinu goes and tells Par'o, מי שיש לו עבד, if a person has a servant, אם אין עונח יום אחד בשבוע, הוא מת. You must give them off. Winter vacation. You must give them a break. Students can't function if they don't have 2 weeks off. Why? They probably become stupider when they come back from the break. Okay, but school system feels that they need a break. You have to give them a break, Par'o. ואילו עבדיך, אם אין אתה מניח להם יום אחד בשבוע, הם מתים. Now, this is before Par'o hates Moshe Rabbeinu. He raised Moshe. It's his son. Whatever Moshe says goes. אמר לו, לך ועשה להם כמו שתאמר. You're in charge. You're the Mishnah, you're the viceroy. You do whatever you want. You have the Sharbit HaZahab, you have my ring, you have the authority. Do what you want. הלך משה ותיקן להם יום שבת. He established for them to rest on Shabbat. Says the Mikdash HaLevi, הרי לנו כי לפרעה הייתה זכות הנוגעת ליום השבת. Par'o has the merit of Bnei Yisrael keeping Shabbat. He says, Omnam lo haya ze mitoch tov lev. Even though he didn't want to do it, he didn't want to give them off because you really loved them, because you wanted them to work even stronger. Ela mitoch de'aga letovato. He worried about himself. Ulam. Kichlot hakol, in the end of the day, bottom line. המעשה שעשה הביא תועלת לעם ישראל, והקדוש ברוך הוא איננו מקפח שכר כל בריאה. Borei Olam doesn't forget this at all. You gave them off on Shabbat, I will give you measure for measure. You will have a lot of pain and damage from the Arbeh, but b'zchut the Shabbat that you gave the Jews, I'm going to make the Arbeh rest on Shabbat. Amazing. How Borei Olam doesn't forget anything. How Borei Olam remembers everything. How Borei Olam has so much compassion. Me'ata efshar lomar, says the Hacham, says the Sefer. From here we see שבזכות אותו מעשה שנעשה לפני שנים רבות, זכה פרעה לשכר מידה כנגד מידה, וגם ההרבה אשר בא בגבולו, נח ביום השבת ואפשר לו מנוחה קלה. You gave them rest, the הרבה will give you rest on Shabbat. מידה כנגד מידה. Borei Olam doesn't forget anything. Nothing goes unnoticed from Borei Olam. With that being said, that the arbeh, the locust, the grasshoppers rested on the day of rest, the 7th day Shabbat. Now we understand why Par'o says, "Ve'aser me'alai rak et hamavet hazeh." Please do me a favor. I can't take these locusts anymore. I can't take the grasshoppers. They will bring the death of me. Why? Because it says over here in the Sefer Kitvei Abba Mari, he says, "Akum sheshavat hayab mita, umakazo mevi'a mita." He says, if these grasshoppers are going to rest on Shabbat, that means we're going to rest from being troubled or pained. That means we're keeping Shabbat. Goy she Shabbat hayav mita. If a goy keeps Shabbat, is Hayav Mitah. So do me a favor. I don't want the locust to teach me that they have to keep Shabbat. That means I have to keep Shabbat, because if I keep Shabbat as a goy, I'm Hayav Mitah. So please, get rid of the locust. I don't want them to teach me that I, as a goy, have to keep Shabbat, because Shabbat, if a goy keeps Shabbat, it's Hayav Mitah. I'll read you his words. ובהיות שהרבה נח בשבת, והיה זה לנס ולמופת לשמור ולקדש את השבת גם בתוך עמי, לכך אמר הסר המוות הזה. I don't want all of a sudden get enlightened or all of a sudden take the lesson that I also have to keep Shabbat. Because if I keep Shabbat like the locust, I'm Hayav Mitah. So please, get rid of the locust. I don't want them to teach me anything. I don't want to rest on Shabbat. That's going to bring the death of me. That's one explanation. But there's another explanation that I saw, that the Arbe was not only teaching Par'o and really Am Yisrael about to keep Shabbat, was also teaching them a very valuable lesson. And that lesson is Tehiyat HaMetim. Now you see, what was Moshe Rabbeinu doing the whole time? Now the Makot lasted a year. Sachakol, they lasted a year. I saw in the Sefer HaDorot, I believe, that they started in Adar, and they ended in Nisan of the next year. So exactly like either 11 months, 12 months, or plus year, give or take. So what was Moshe Rabbeinu doing the whole time in between every Makkah, even in the Makkot? When the Egyptians were suffering from the Makkot, when the Egyptians they had Bara, they had the Arbe, what were Am Yisrael doing? What was Moshe Rabbeinu doing? So Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching Am Yisrael Emunah, was teaching them to believe in Borei Olam, to fortify, to strengthen themselves in Borei Olam, to keep Shabbat, to believe in something called Tehiyat HaMetim. You'll ask me, why is Moshe Rabbeinu teaching them to believe in Tehiyat HaMetim? What does Tehiyat HaMetim have to do? Listen to what the Hacham says. היה משה רבנו בכל עת מלמד את עם ישראל על שמירת שבת. The whole time he was teaching them to keep Shabbat. וכי יש בורא לעולם. There's a creator to the world. שברא אותו בשישה ימים ונח ביום השביעי. That he created in 6 days and he rested on the 7th day. וכן לימדם על עניין תחיית המתים, which we'll get to. והיו פרעה והמצריים מתאמצים לסתור את דבריו. And as much as Moshe tried to instill in Bnei Israel to keep Shabbat, to believe in Tehiyat HaMetim, Paro and his men were deflecting the words. והיו מכריזים שלא לשמוע למשה. They gave an order, don't listen to Moshe. וכי כל דבריו לא נכונים. Don't believe this person, Moshe. He's fooling you. אבל מכת הרבה הייתה תשובה נצחית לתחיית המתים ולשמירת שבת. But when Borei Olam sent the locusts, the grasshoppers, that taught everybody, even the Egyptians, about Shabbat, Tehiyat HaMetim. Let's take it step by step. כשהיו הארבה על כל ארץ מצרים, when the Arbe was on מצרים, הם ישבו על העצים ועל העשבים ואכלו וכרסמו הכל. They ate all the crops, all the flowers, all the trees, all plant life, everything. All of a sudden, Moshe Rabbeinu says, do the bell that goes on every Friday afternoon right before Shabbat. When the locusts heard this bell, all of a sudden they got off the trees and they rested. As it says in Shulchan Aruch, Orach Hayim Siman Shin Lamed Vav, En Olim Ba'ilan. We don't go up on Shabbat. Ben Lach Ben Yabesh. Either it's dry or wet on Shabbat. Ve'en Nitlin Bo. And we don't put anything on it, like we said on Shabbat, with the Stipler Rebbe. He didn't want to even take the coat off on Shabbat because you might break off a twig, you might break off a branch. The Arbe, the locusts, the grasshoppers heard the siren, they heard the bell for Shabbat, they got off the trees and they went down. Mosei Shabbat, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hamabdil ben Kodesh lechol, all of a sudden the grasshoppers, the locusts go back on the trees. Moshe Rabbeinu tells Paro, you see? There's a concept of keeping Shabbat. Even the locusts, even the grasshoppers know to keep Shabbat. He tells Am Yisrael, see what it means to keep Shabbat? The grasshoppers, the locusts are keeping Shabbat. They hear the siren when Shabbat comes in. They hear the siren when Shabbat ends. Mosei Shabbat. They keep Shabbat. You have to keep Shabbat. Rabotai, says the Sefer HaChinuch, Mitzvah Lamed Aleph, Nitzavinu al Shevitat HaShabbat. The reason why we have to keep Shabbat. Forget about Borei Olam creating the world. כדי שיהיה לנו זמן להתבונן בבריאה ולהתחזק באמונה. It's a rat race. This world is a rat race. The bigger one eats the smaller one. You need time to decompress. You need time to think. You need time to rest. If you're working 7 days, your mind won't even forget about emunah and borei olam. It's not a life. There's no quality of life. Even other religions implemented a day of rest, either Friday or Sunday. You need a day of rest. You need time for yourself. לכן, says הספר החינוך, יש ציווי מיוחד בשבת שאדם צריך להרגיש כאילו כל מלאכתו עשויה. On Shabbat, you have to feel like all my work is done. You know, when Borei Olam commands us on Shabbat, he doesn't say, Sheshet Yamim ta'aseh melacha. Sheshet Yamim te'aseh melacha. Work shall be done for you. What does that mean? That on Shabbat, the day of rest, it's as if all your work is done. You have nothing left. It's all done already. You didn't do anything. It's done already. You have so much emunah and Borei Olam that if I rest on Shabbat, I can't lose money. Because Borei Olam worked for me. Imagine that. Borei Olam worked for me. He was the one bringing all the money. I didn't do anything. Shesh Yamim te'aseh melacha. On Shabbat, it's asur even to talk about business transactions. It's asur to talk about anything other than Shabbat. V'chibato me'asot derachecha v'daber dabar. You can't even talk about anything other than Shabbat. Why? Because Shabbat is a day of rest. The Arbe is teaching us, the locusts, the grasshoppers are teaching us to keep Shabbat. Says the Sefer HaChinuch, שלא תהרר אחר המלאכה ותתחזק באמונה בורא עולם. With that being said, בשבת אנחנו צריכים לעבוד על עצמנו. להסיר את כל הדאגות שיש לנו. No worries on Shabbat. Asur to worry. In fact, you can't even, if during the week you're asking Hashem for your own supplications, Refa'enu, Honil Adam Da'at, Barechenu, Parnasa, on Shabbat we don't have any of that. On Shabbat it's not about you. On Shabbat it's about Borei Olam. You're one with Hashem. There's nothing lacking. There's nothing missing in your life. Everything is complete. Ba Shabbat, Ba Shalom, Ba Menuha. That's why on Shabbat we say Shabbat Shalom. The word Shalom doesn't only mean peace. The word Shalom means Shalem. It's complete. When you say Shabbat Shalom to your friend, you're telling him and telling yourself, Shabbat Shalom, we are resting right now. We're complete right now. We're not thinking about anything. We're not worrying about anything. Adam shemahmir al atzmo ve'eno doeg beShabbat. A person that doesn't worry on Shabbat, Jack, ומתנהג בשבת כאילו כל פרנסתו מצויה ואין לו דאגות, יזכה שיהיה לו שפע של פרנסה טובה. You want a segula לפרנסה טובה? Not only don't work on Shabbat, but on Shabbat don't even think about work. You know, that's why there's a big mahloket. If I have an Amazon store, can I keep it open on Shabbat? Do I have to shut it on Shabbat? Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. But what I do know is that a person that has that Amazon store open on Shabbat is always worrying, how many sales did I get? Did I make money or not? At least if you close it, that's it. Out of sight, out of mind. It's out of your brain. There's nothing to think about. Not even thinking about maybe somebody bought because nobody can buy. It's not in your brain anymore. You're not thinking about anything. You're not worrying about anything. Nothing's bothering you anymore. It's only you and Borei Olam, you and your Creator. There's a beautiful song. Danny, you know the song by Journeys? Man and his Creator. That's what he calls it. It's time to say good Shabbos. Because all your work is done. You know, Eliyahu knows the song. Why? Because it's man and his Creator, or you and your Creator. What a wonderful time. Beautiful. It's Shabbat. So that's how the Arbe teaches us as Am Yisrael to keep Shabbat. The Arbe rested on Shabbat. Am Yisrael is supposed to rest on Shabbat. Teaching the Egyptians also, look, there's an inyan of Shabbat. There's an inyan of resting. Am Yisrael, look, there's an inyan of Shabbat. There's an inyan of resting. That's Shabbat. What about Tahiyat HaMetim? When Par'o tells Moshe Rabbeinu, do me a favor, please, supplicate, get rid of these locusts. Vayafoch Hashem. So Moshe Rabbeinu goes outside of the palace. Vayetzei me'im Paro ve'etar el Hashem. He asked Borei Olam to get rid of the locust. ויהפוך השם רוח ים חזק מאוד, ויישא את הארבה ויתקעהו ים מסוף. So Borei Olam takes all the locusts and he puts it in the Yam Suf. לא נשאר ארבה אחד בכל גבול מצרים. Not one grasshopper was left. Rashi says, what does that mean? Rashi says, אף המלוחים שמלחו מהם. Even the ones that they pickled. They made them chocolate-covered grasshoppers. Even the ones that they salted. Even the ones that were in the jar, in the pantry. No grasshoppers left. So what happened, Danny? The ones that they pickled and they salted and they got them ready to eat, that they died, came back to life, left the jars and went out of Mitzrayim in the Yam Suf. That's Tahiyat HaMetim. Comes the naysayer Par'ah to say there's no such thing as Tahiyat HaMetim. What are you talking about? Look, the grasshoppers, no nishar arbeh. You know the Sephardim, we learned about the frogs on Shabbat. The Sephardim till today, they're in Egypt. They're in the water. It says in the Pasuk, in Perashat Va'era, the Sephardim are still in the water. But the arbeh, there's nothing left. Zero. Why? Because Borei Olam said, even the ones that died, go out of Mitzrayim to listen to Moshe Rabbeinu, not one was left. That's Tahiyat HaMetim. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells Par'ah, you see, you don't believe in Tahiyat HaMetim, you don't believe in Shabbat, the grasshopper is giving you a lesson. I just want to say something about Tahiyat HaMetim. Right before I came over here, I spoke at an Arayat. It's always devastating when a person has to either pay a Shiva Akol or go to the mourner's house or go to Arayat, because, I mean, what can you say in the end of the day? It's like repetitive. It's the same thing over and over. But we do believe as Am Yisrael that there is something called Tahiyat HaMetim. And it's one of the 13 principles of Harambam. Moreno Harambam, the Maimonides, says one of the 13 principles of our faith is that there will be Hametim Atidim Lihyot. The ones that deceased, that passed away, will come back to life. Rabbi Aharon of Belz, Zechutot Agem Ba'adenu, where he witnessed the atrocities and Gehinam Alei Adamot and the Holocaust, and Baruch Hashem, when he survived and he went up to Eretz Israel, it was Tet Shevat, Tavshin Dalid. Tet Shevat is like in another day or two. And it was the first Shabbat in Eretz Israel. And the students, they expected the rabbi to be very upset, very sad. His family wiped out. Nobody left. He now is in Eretz Israel, but just the opposite. They saw him, he's very happy, besimcha, he's smiling at everybody, he's singing with them, and didn't understand. Is he putting on a show? Or is this really how it is? So somebody mustered up the courage and the audacity to ask the Hacham, the rabbi, tell us your secret. He tells them, in Mitzrayim, in next week's Perashat Beshalach, it says, V'hamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eres Mitzrayim. 80% of Jews perished in Makat Hoshech, in the darkness. 80% of Jews. One calculation I saw today, 280 million Jews. We're used to 30 million, 6 million, 280 million Yehudim perished, passed away in Makat Hoshech. He made that number the calculation. If you want, I'll show you after. And after they all passed away, they all get to Kiriat Yam Suf, and what happens? Az Yashir Moshe Ubnei Yisrael et Shirah Hazot LaHashem. They open their mouths up and they start singing to Borei Olam. You're singing? Let's take that number for example. 280 million Jews passed away. You're singing? Are you not upset? You should be crying. You should be spilling tears right now. You're singing? But what does it say in the Pasuk? Az Yashir Moshe. It will be a day that Moshe Rabbeinu will sing to Borei Olam. In Tahiyat HaMetim. The Metim will come back to life. So says Rabbi Aharon of Belz to all students that were wondering, how could he be so happy? He says, does it bother me? Yes. Does it hurt me? Of course it hurts me. But I have the belief that there will be Tahiyat HaMetim. As a Jew, we must believe there will be a Tahiyat HaMetim. All our loved ones that we long so much to see them once again. We will see them Ba'adat Hashem very soon in Tahiyat al-Metim. That's our emunah. That's our emunah in Borei Olam. Says the Sefer Meh HaShilawah, he says like this. There's another lesson we learn from the Arbe. As you see, we're just saying lessons that we learn from the Arbe, and then we'll conclude with something beautiful from Hatam Sofer. Says the Sefer Meh HaShilawah, he says, Ba'arbe nimtza middat tova. The locusts have a good quality in them, good character trait. Good quality. What is it? כמו שכתוב במשלי, שלמה המלך writes in Proverbs, in משלי, מלך אין להרבה. Grasshoppers don't have a king. Now you know ants have a queen ant. The queen, she's the one who sits on her throne and she sends out the orders, and they're very busily going around and getting these morsels of sesames to bring it back to the queen. The Arbe, on the other hand, don't have a melech, don't have a king. Why, says the Meh HaShilawah? היינו מפני שיש בהם אחדות ואהבה. ולכן אין צריכים למלך. Because they have love for one another. They don't need a king. Why? כי הצטרכות המלך, the reason why a nation needs a king, or a president, or someone to tell them what to do, ומפני שאין אחדות בין בני אדם. Because there's no love for one another. Everyone wants to do מה שבא לו, מה שכיף לו. What I want to do, I'll do. You need a person, you need a king to implement laws to keep you in check. והמין הזה, but this grasshopper, אין בהם שום שנאה, לכן לא יצטרכו למלך. But they don't have any שנאה. רבותיי, if we're talking about תחיית המתים, now we know that בעזרת Hashem in our תחיית המתים, we want to come back with all our 613 parts of our body. 248 organs and 365 sinews and veins and all the other stuff. And they're keneged the mitzvot of the Torah. They correspond to all the mitzvot of the Torah. But my question to you, Danny, is I'm not a Kohen. There's a mitzvah from the Torah that the Kohen eats a terumah. If I'm not a Kohen, how could I eat terumah? So you know what it is? If I love a Kohen so much, his mitzvot become part of me, and my mitzvot become part of him. When we have ahdud be'am Yisrael, when we feel like we're all one, with no differences, with no complications, with no discrepancies, with no fights and arguments, we are all one, we are a complete individual. 248, 365, complete. Then we can come back in Tahiyat al-Metim. Because to come back in Tahiyat al-Metim, you need everything intact. You need the 613. How can you come back with one missing? So that's what we learn from over here. The Arbez Mesamel Ahdut. The Arbez Mesamel unity. Being one with each other. But I have to tell you what the Zohar HaKadosh says. The Zohar HaKadosh Helek Bet says, Mishchu yomin illa'in le'anhara le'yomin tata'in. Pull away from the holy days and give it and extend it to the other days. Zohar doesn't make any sense. What does he mean over here? Pull away from the holy days, from the lofty days, from the high days, and give it to the mundane days, give it to the regular days. What is the Zohar HaKadosh talking about? So we know in this week's Perashat, when Moshe Rabbeinu instructs them to bring the Korban Pesach, he tells them, Be'asor lachodesh hazeh, ve'ikhu lahem ish se lebet abot se labayit. Now the Egyptians, they worshipped sheep. Their Avodah Zarah was the sheep. That's why they hated shepherds, because how can you be a shepherd on my sheep? You know, doesn't make any sense. So they hated shepherds and they worshipped the sheep. What day was it, Rabbotai, when Moshe Rabbeinu instructed them? I mean, what day was the 10th of the month of Nisan that year? Was Yom Shabbat. Shabbat. And you had to hold it from Asor, from the 10th of the month until the 14th of the month. Korban Pesach, that night, everybody exit Mitzrayim. When Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Am Yisrael to take the sheep, he tells them, Mishechu ukhu lachem tzon. Pull the sheep and take it and prepare it for Korban Pesach. The Zohar HaKadosh asks, why does Moshe Rabbeinu have to say the word Mishechu? Pull it. You could just say, take a sheep. What is this word Mishechu? Pull. So Zohar HaKadosh says what we said earlier. Mishechu yomin illa'in. What day was it? It was Shabbat. Take something from the Shabbat, extend it to the regular days of the week. Says the Zohar HaKadosh, Kol ha-mekadesh yom ha-shebi'i kara'ui lo. Everyone that sanctifies the day of rest, which is the seventh day, which is not Saturday. Alav Shalom, there was a great rabbi amongst us in this community. His name was Hacham Yaakov Israel. Alav Shalom. On East 7th, if you see, there's a shul by the name of Ahaba Ve'ahva. Not the one on Ocean Parkway. Ahaba Ve'ahva on East 7th. Alav Shalom, he was the rabbi of that shul. I learned with him, Baruch Hashem. I had the zechut to learn with him many years. There was one Shabbat where I told him, okay, Rabbi, I won't see you this week. I'll see you next Saturday. And Alav Shalom, he tells me, a Yehudi does not call the day of rest Saturday. It's called Shabbat. We don't call it Saturday. And ever since then, I got it into my head. It's not called Saturday. It's called Yom Shabbat. Even calling Shabbat a different name, Shabbat, is sanctifying Shabbat. Friday is Friday, okay, but it's not Saturday. It's Yom HaShabbat. Even the day itself has a certain name to it. Sanctification, a purification to it, a holiness to it. Says the Zohar HaKadosh, Kol ha-mekadesh yom ha-shebi'i v'shomer Shabbat kadat v'kahalacha. Ladies and gentlemen, keeping Shabbat does not mean sleeping the whole day on Shabbat and then going to class. That's not a Shomer Shabbat. Or Shomer Shabbat is a person that learns the halachot of Shabbat. You know how many intricate details and laws there is on Shabbat? Of Borer, of sometimes Zoreya, of sometimes Me'amer, Me'mareyah, Mohek, Kotev, 39 Melachot. If we don't learn the halachot of Shabbat, how do we know if we are keeping Shabbat the right way? Shomer Shabbat is learning the laws of Shabbat. Says the Zohar HaKadosh, Zoche lehamshich kedushat Shabbat al sheshet yemei ha'ma'aseh liyot kol yemot hashavua shelemim. I don't have to go far. Take the food that you eat on Shabbat. It has a certain taste to it. Even when you eat it as a leftover on Sunday night or Monday night, it's special. You eat it on Tuesday. You eat the same food, but it's not leftover. On Tuesday, it's not the same taste. There's a certain aura. There's a certain spirit. There's a certain kedusha from Shabbat that permeates, that extends, that prolongs even during the week. That's what the Zohar HaKadosh is saying. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is telling them. You see, on Shabbat is a special day right now. We're getting rid of the Avodah Zarah in our life. We're working on our emunah of keeping Shabbat. Just like the locusts, we're learning that lesson from the locusts, from the grasshoppers. We're keeping Shabbat. Take that lesson. Implement it in your life. Take it, and not only should Shabbat be holy, but you sanctified yourself on Shabbat. Sanctify yourself also during the week. Mishechu. Take that Kedusha from Shabbat and extend it for during the week. You act in a certain way during the week, right? You know, we have a halacha. Rosh Chodesh, we should be wearing clothes for Shabbat. Rosh Chodesh is a special day. Shabbat is a special day. Yom Tov is a special day. Rosh Chodesh, we should wear a nice suit. In fact, you have to buy your wife a present. Do you know? You have to buy your wife a present every single Rosh Chodesh. Granted, it doesn't have to be something fancy or expensive or luxurious like jewelry. Something small. Chocolate, flowers, a nice scarf, glove, something small. On Rosh Chodesh, it's a special day. But not only should Rosh Chodesh be a special day, because you walk dignified, in a special day for Rosh Chodesh, Shabbat, Yom Tov. As a Yehudi, every single day should be a day where you sanctify Borei Olam's name. That's what the Zohar HaKadosh is telling us. The way you act on Shabbat, you should be acting like this throughout the week. You're a Yehudi, don't forget that. You're special, don't forget that. Says the Noam Elimelech in Perashat Tazriah. אנחנו צריכים למנות הימים שאנו אומרים היום יום ראשון בשבת קודש. Now ladies, I'm not sure if you say this every single day, but we have something called shir shel yom. We say, hayom yom echad b'Shabbat kodesh, hayom yom sheni b'Shabbat kodesh. Every single day we're supposed to say, today is the first day of Shabbat. Sunday. What does Shabbat have to do with anything? Because I'm looking forward to Shabbat. That's how important Shabbat is in my eyes. I can't wait till Shabbat comes. I can't wait. Especially when men, we work, and we get exhausted, we wait for Shabbat. But we shouldn't wait for Shabbat to rest on Shabbat. No. We should wait for Shabbat because now we could finally learn on Shabbat. Come closer to Borei Olam. Spend time with our families on Shabbat. Sanctify Hashem more on Shabbat. He says every single day, v'hakavana bazeh. Why do you say hayom yom sheni b'Shabbat kodesh? Sherishi, Rebi'i, Hamishi, Shishi b'Shabbat kodesh. He says, kedei leachnis kedushat Shabbat b'sheshet yemei ha'chol. Like the Zohar says, take the spirit of Shabbat, the kedusha of Shabbat from every single day and from Shabbat and put it into every single day. That's why you say hayom yom sheni b'Shabbat. Hayom yom shenishi b'Shabbat. You know, the great rabbis, every single time they saw a nice piece of meat, what did they say? L'chbot Shabbat Kodesh. They saw a nice piece of meat, l'chbot Shabbat Kodesh. Every meat or every article of clothing or every piece of jewelry or every item, food item that they saw, this is for Shabbat. In fact, when you go by from Tuesday, you're able to say, l'chbot Shabbat Kodesh. This is for Shabbat. That's how important Shabbat should be in our eyes. So why Borei Olam chose that the arbeh should rest on Shabbat is to teach us a lesson. Look, even the grasshoppers rest on Shabbat. You should also rest on Shabbat. Know the quality of Shabbat, the sanctification of the Shabbat, of the holiness of the Shabbat. And I'll conclude the class with the Hatam Sofer. The Hatam Sofer says, V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat. Am Yisrael should keep the Shabbat to do the Shabbat. What does that mean? La'asot et ha-Shabbat. He says like this. Kol ha-meshamer Shabbat ke'ilchato. He quotes the Gemara Masechet Shabbat Kof Yot Het. Kol ha-meshamer Shabbat ke'ilchato notlim lo nahala beli metzarim. Something unbelievable, he says. Now Shabbat is limited. What do I mean by Shabbat is limited? Shabbat starts at Friday evening and it ends on Shabbat, Mosei Shabbat. It's limited to time. So if you keep Shabbat that's limited to time, listen to the Hatam Sofer, quoting the Gemara, Borei Olam will give you shefa and abundance with no limits. You kept something that's limited, Borei Olam will give you something unlimited. Listen to what he says. He says, HaMeshamer Shabbat ke'ilchato. Key word, ke'ilchato. Keeping Shabbat with all its laws. Learn the laws of Shabbat. Learn the law. I implore you, I beg you. Learn the laws of Shabbat. The most important laws of Shabbat and Berachot. He says, HaMeshamer Shabbat ke'ilchato yizke lish'ob shefa kedusha be'ofen sheyu kol yemei ha'ma'aseh mekudash b'kedushat Shabbat. All the days will be sanctified like Shabbat. V'hinei Shabbat yesh lo metzarim. Shabbat has limits. Why? Ki nichnas tehilat leil Shabbat ve'yoseh b'sof hayom. Like we said, it starts at a certain time and it ends at a certain time. It's limited. It has a time limit. Ach ha'meshamero poretz gidro shel Shabbat be'ofen shetiyeh kol hashavua kodesh laHashem ve'zehu nahala beli metzarim. But if you keep Shabbat, you're extending Shabbat. You're breaking the barrier of Shabbat. It's no longer limited to Friday afternoon till Mosei Shabbat. You're extending it throughout the week. When you keep Shabbat, Borei Olam will say, oh, you extended Shabbat. You broke the borders, the limits of Shabbat. I will break the limits in your life. I will give you an abundance without any walls. I'll give you so much shefa and beracha and abundance. That's what it means, says the Hatam Sofer. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat, la'asot et Shabbat. You keep Shabbat on, let's use the word Saturday. You keep Shabbat on the seventh day. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael Shabbat, la'asot et Shabbat. Then the Shabbat will permeate, will spread throughout the week. It will no longer be only one day of Shabbat. The whole week will be Shabbat from the Kedusha of Shabbat. Why do you think we say in Birkat HaMazon, הרחמן הוא ינחילנו לעולם שכולו, ליום שכולו שבת ומנוחה לחיי העולמים. When Mashiach comes, B'ezrat Hashem, it will be one long day of Shabbat. What do I mean? Well, you can't work anymore, can't drive a car, can't use your phone. No, it will be a day of rest, a day of only you and Borei Olam, a day of Kedusha, a day of holiness, a day of sanctity, only you and Borei Olam. And when we have emunah and Borei Olam, when we sanctify ourselves on Shabbat, then everything falls into place. Then it's easy to keep the Hayat HaMetim, then it's easy to believe in that, and the other item. That's what the Ba'al HaTurim means. We have the word Vayanach Bada Arbe. We have the word Vayanach in the creation of the world. Because Borei Olam rested on Shabbat. The Arbe rested on Shabbat. The Arbe is teaching the Egyptians and the Yehudim to strengthen your emunah in Borei Olam, to strengthen your emunah in Shabbat, to fortify yourselves in the halachot of Shabbat, in the inyan, in the concept of Tahiyat HaMetim. And B'ezrat Hashem, as it says in the Pasuk, Ki me'etzetecha me'eretz Mitzrayim ar'enu niflaot. You know, when Mashiach comes, B'ezrat Hashem, it will make all the makot of Mitzrayim pale in comparison to what will be. We think Dam Sefardei Akinim and the 10 makot were astonishing. We are going to see something even much greater, even more beautiful B'ezrat Hashem when Mashiach comes and Borei Olam rebuilds the Beit HaMikdash. B'mera b'yamenu, amen ve'amen.